You know, you remind me of my father.
What did you think of him?
Of who?
Your father.
I hated my father.
Okay, so
Hold on.
all right, Gus.
For anyone who doesn't know, there's a giant bear beneath us chewing on a bone.
Well, it's better than barking at the door.
Honestly, that bark scared me.
I just hope I don't get a noise complaint because he's been barking a lot.
Has he?
I don't want to
Leo.
leave him home alone for too long yet because he's
'Cause
like
you're-
not used to the space
Right.
and
right,
not used to like the noise of people outside.
Right. The constant, like, traffic.
Yeah, it doesn't
That you-
it
that
doesn't
you don't
bother
get.
him hearing like people above us or people to the side of us because he's used to like noise in the house.
Well, that's good.
But he doesn't like the noise outside the door.
Right.
You know?
Poor guy.
Okay, let's start over.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Gus, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Who is the best film portrayal of the Joker ever?
Heath Ledger.
Has to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't... You could try and argue that Jack Nicholson was, but it's Heath Ledger.
Who is the second best film portrayal of the Joker?
Well, Dom, a lot of people would say Jack Nicholson, but I would say...
I have a feeling you have the right answer here because there's only one that I will accept.
I would say Mark Hamill. But you don't know about Mark Hamill because he's in animated Batman movies and
Pretty
not
much-
live action.
Pretty
so,
much all of them.
Yeah, I mean, you
That's okay. That's an exaggeration, but he's in.
and maybe not though because he does voice the Joker in almost everything not live action Batman.
Right, and in a lot, like people don't really know that's part of his career.
Right.
Like they just know him as Luke Skywalker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Luke Skywalker, and then some people who do know are like, he voices the Joker in animated Batman movies, and people are like, what? No, he doesn't. Come on.
And pretty much any animated Batman forum.
TV shows.
He voiced the Joker in Batman the Animated Series.
The original animated series.
In Batman Beyond.
Yep.
And then he voiced the Joker for the Arkham video game series,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of goes overlooked, but really the similarities between video game voice acting and animation voice acting, they're real close.
Right.
And it kind of goes underappreciated because not many people really pay attention to voice acting in video games because it doesn't necessarily change how the game plays.
Right.
But it certainly brings those Arkham games to a new level.
Well, something else about the Arkham games is Batman is voiced by Kevin Conroy, who is also, again, when it comes to animated Batman, Batman Beyond, all the Batman animated films, he is Batman in almost all of them. The only animated Batman movies that I can think of where Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill aren't Batman and the Joker is The Dark Knight Returns. This is the only two part 1 and 2, the only two movies I know of where those two guys aren't Batman and the Joker.
And that is true for the movie we're talking about today.
Yes, it is.
Which is Batman the Killing Joke.
Mm-hmm.
Which is based, obviously all of these are based off of comics or comic books, but The Killing Joke is also one of the most iconic Batman comic books as well. And this Batman the Killing Joke, the movie, didn't come out until 2016.
Yeah.
And I think the comic book was published in the 80s. So it's been around a while and has been the inspiration for a lot of Batman-related movies and writings and
especially
everything.
a lot of Joker storylines because
Right.
the main purpose of the Killing Joke was to serve as kind of an origin story for the Joker when it was written. And by the way, the Killing Joke was originally written by Alan Moore, and Alan Moore is the guy who created Watchmen.
Oh, really?
So he's like a very well-known comic book graphic novel writer.
Okay, cool.
So he has a pretty big history with kind of groundbreaking superhero stories, so to speak.
Most recently, and I saw a lot of ties. This movie really gave a lot of inspiration for the most recent Joker movie. There's a lot of similarities between the two, but also this is one of the most successful and also well-known Joker origin stories. And there's a lot of different ones because Joker as a character in the comic books is so mysterious. He's written his character is written in such a way that nobody really knows his true origin story, and that remains the same for most movies. There's a reason why every film portrayal and a lot of the different comic books have given him a new origin story, because it's not as concrete as, say, the Batman origin story. Everybody knows that, and it's the same regardless of which form you're reading or listening to or watching. Whereas with the Joker, these writers have so much freedom to really come up with whatever kind of story that they want.
And the differing origin stories really just add to the Joker's mythology. Right? And the whole idea that no matter what story you're peering into, there's always going to be a somewhat of a different or unknown background. And I think it adds a layer to his character, because it makes him more mysterious, and it makes what his potential for evil also, it ups the stakes for how far he could go.
Right, and this movie really pushes the limits with that. First of all, it's an R-rated animated movie, an R-rated animated Batman movie, which is very specific, but it's also something that has never really been done before. Right. And just kind of the brutality of the Joker as a character. And obviously the biggest ties to the most recent Joker movie are the brutality of it, but also the story of a guy who is a failing comic who kind of turned to crime in order to be noticed by the masses.
Yeah, he just keeps getting bad breaks, so he finally breaks completely.
Right, and the idea that what made the Joker is one bad day. And that's kind of a theme throughout this movie. The Joker and the relationship between the Joker and the Batman is already well established in this movie. But when it starts diving into the origin of the character, it really kind of comes down to showing the day that the Joker kind of snapped.
Yeah, right. It also, I think this movie also, it examines the relationship between Barbara Gordon, who plays...
what was that?
Barbara Gordon.
Barbara Gordon.
I didn't roll my N very well there. Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
And Batman.
Yeah.
And Gordon is Jim Gordon's daughter, who also is Batgirl in a lot of the Batman lore and comics and storylines. She is who ends up playing Batgirl in most of them. And I like a lot of how that kind of relationship plays out. So the beginning is kind of like the first 20 minutes are kind of like a prologue almost to kind of establish the relationship between Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne as Batman.
Right.
It kind of shows their relationship to each other, and then it gets to kind of the main storyline of the Killing Joke.
Right, and it's kind of that beginning part where it's kind of showing Batman and Batgirl fighting together. It's kind of there also to establish the fact that Batman is really invested in these events that are going to play out moving forward. Like, he has a reason to for this feud with the Joker. Right. And it also establishes that he has already had these run-ins with the Joker before.
Right. He's been Batman for a while.
He knows who he is and what he's done and what he's capable of.
Yeah.
And it also kind of dives into the idea that Batman and the Joker are kind of these as it was put in The Dark Knight, it is a unstoppable force and an immovable object.
Right.
And even in this movie, Batman wants to do things the right way, where Joker wants to push him to his limits to get him to do things the wrong way. He wants to make Batman almost a villain of sorts.
Yeah, one of the big ideas I think of this movie was that they wanted to make Batman and the Joker out to be people who exist on their different sides of the same coin, right? They come from a very similar background, and the difference is just a flip of the coin between the two, right? And I think that idea plays out very well throughout this movie. I especially think one of my favorite parts of this movie is actually the end, the final fight and conversation that Batman and the Joker have with each other. Batman, talks about, like, he's like, just, it's over, like, I'm gonna take you in, all this stuff. And Joker's like, I'm tired of this. What are we doing? We're playing the same game over and over again.
Yeah.
You fight me, you put me away, I get out. He's like, this needs to end.
Yeah.
He's like, we're gonna keep doing this forever. And I kind of like the idea that both of these characters get to the point where they're kind of just like, I'm so tired of doing this. Like, something has to make it stop.
Right. And it ends in such a way that you don't really know how their relationship continues on. It ends with the Joker telling Batman a joke,
and they both start laughing.
And then it just fades to black and the credits roll.
Did you notice, though, that the Joker stops laughing?
I did, yeah.
In the audio?
And I wouldn't have noticed, but I was watching it with subtitles on.
Same. I was too.
And it popped up saying Joker stops laughing.
Yeah. I love the ambiguity, because, there are so many things that could have happened there to why he stopped. Maybe it was just out of, like, maybe he just had a realization moment that, like, man, Batman is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, he stops. Maybe Batman kills him. I don't know.
Maybe the Joker is, like you said, he realizes that maybe Batman's a little crazier than I thought, and he's kind of shocked by it, or he's actually afraid of the Batman.
It actually, like, takes him.
Takes
him back.
It's no longer funny to him,
right?
Because he's kind of realizing what Batman is capable of.
Right. So, Dom, here's what I am really excited about.
Okay.
About this movie. I'm excited about this movie because up until this point, you've never seen really any animated Batman
I haven't
films or anything of that sort.
I haven't watched any of them. This was my introduction to. I'm familiar with Mark Hamill voicing the Joker.
Right.
And I've watched other animated Batman or animated superhero movies, but never really Batman, which is also kind of crazy because Batman is my favorite superhero. Also, The Dark Knight is my favorite movie. So I'm kind of surprised that this was my introduction to animated Batman.
Of all the animated superhero movies, the Batman ones are far and above better than all of the other ones that have ever come out.
Yeah.
So why I'm excited is there are at least 6 brand new Batman movies that I get to show you.
Yeah.
And you are going to absolutely love them because most of them are as good or better than The Killing Joke is in terms of story, in terms of character development. I mean, they are some of the best animated content you'll ever see.
Dang.
And it just
That's
really
high praise.
It just really excites me that I get to show them to you now because you saw The Killing Joke and you really liked it.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It makes me feel excited.
I think that the reason why I liked this movie so much is because I'm very familiar with Batman as a character. And so I love watching this and seeing all the ties to previous films or to just the Batman, like the different storylines. That's one of the cool things about comic books and then therefore comic book movies, is that there's so many different storylines that have been followed. Name any comic book character and there has been a number of writers who all write completely different stories and different storylines and different origins, or the same writer who has explored all these different avenues for that character. And that's what kind of makes this exciting, is because in this movie I saw connections to all of the other Batman stories that I have heard before.
Right.
And I mean, really, this one was a Joker story more than a Batman story. But it's exciting to see those connections and how it might be, how I might be able to explore that further with other movies.
It's like this movie shows you where all the avenues in other Batman media came from, almost.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is the actual origin of so many, like, extrapolated storylines in other Batman media. And it's cool to see, like, this is where it came from. That's what's cool about, and that's what's cool about a lot of the animated Batman movies, is they're all based on the actual comics or graphic novels. Like some of them like a frame by frame like remake of the graphic novel. And it's always, every time I've watched a new one, at least, it's always so cool to see, oh, this is where, like, this plot line came from in The Dark Knight Rises, or this is where this came from in Batman Begins, or, like, they must have taken this idea from this here and put it into that. Like, well, you see that throughout all of the animated media, which is a really cool. It's cool. As such a fan, it's cool to see that.
That's always, and I never really read a lot of comic books. I had a collection of Spider-Man comic books when I was growing up.
Nice.
But it's like you said, I really like, even if I haven't read it, I like researching kind of where these storylines came from and how the movie might differ from the comic books. Something that got me into that was The Walking Dead, which is a comic book series. And so following the TV show and where they've differed. But also, this movie makes, just briefly, some of the connections it makes between, like, Joker and the Red Hood. Red Hood is one of the most iconic Batman villains ever created. And this one kind of gave the idea that the Joker could be the Red Hood, but that the Red Hood was more of a cover-up, and then he became the Joker. But it just briefly gives you that kind of glimpse of it's almost like a shout out to the other storylines. Like, this movie wasn't going to run with the Red Hood storyline, but here's a little bit of a shout out. Here's a little nugget, and you can kind of imagine for yourself how that might play out, because then it'll play out in other storylines that you can watch through.
It's like a cool little Easter egg. Like, in this world of Batman and the Joker, the Red Hood is like, the Joker was always a part of the Red Hood in this storyline, not like in a major way. But it was just a cool way to kind of open up the idea that the Red Hood is like this collection of, it's never been one person. It's always been this collection of people. And in this world, the Joker ran into that collection at one point before he became the Joker. There are a lot of cool little storylines similar to that in this movie.
Well, and more of the, classic Joker stories where he is the way he is because he fell into a pool of acid or something like that. In this movie, in a way, Batman almost created the Joker. And that's something that's explored deeper in animated versions of Batman and the Joker, more so than in film versions. But I thought that one point I wanted to make, this is going back to what we already talked about with the ending. The whole, like, Joker making a joke and then they both laugh and then it stops. It kind of reminded me of Joker movie. Was that 2019?
Yes. Yeah. It was.
Yeah, so it reminds me of
2019 seems like forever ago.
It reminds me of Joker 2019 where he's laughing and he says that he thought of a joke, but you wouldn't get it.
Like, yeah.
The kind of the vibes given off in that scene are the exact same as this ending scene.
Absolutely.
And it's so cool. It's so cool to see that connection. Also, this movie was only like an hour long. It's an hour 15.
That's how all the animated Batman movies are about, like, an hour. They fall right into like the 75 to 80 minute window.
Something that I was kind of thinking about when I watched, though, is that if you did a recreation of the animated movie and you turn, like, if you were to turn The Killing Joke into a live action movie following it shot for shot, it probably wouldn't work. the way that the story kind of jumps around and the way that scenes cut from one to another, it watches the way that a comic book reads, right? And you couldn't really do that with a live action portrayal.
Probably not, no.
And do it as well.
Definitely not as well.
And so I was kind of thinking of that. At first, my thought was, why do we give animated movies a pass for kind of this choppy editing style and the storyline that's not real smooth, not always real linear? Why do we accept that for animated movies? But then I got to thinking that it's maybe not that we give them a pass or that we could deem it acceptable. It's that in live action, it's a little harder to do that way and make it still make sense.
And there's a little more separation between comic books to live action, whereas from comic books to animation, they're a little like in like the spectrum of media. Those two are much closer to each other in terms of style and similarity than live action and a comic or a graphic novel are. So I think that's why there's a little bit more of a pass there too, is because when we're watching an animated movie, we have a little more of that kind of that visual, like moving image. It's an actual just an image that moves from frame to frame. It's an actual drawing as opposed to live action, which is, moving images of real life space. I think that's why there's a little bit of a pass there. Another point I wanted to make, and I think if you watch this movie, it might go kind of unnoticed. This is probably the most brutal depiction of the Joker we've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole, because one of the whole big storylines is like the fact that he paralyzes Barbara Gordon by shooting her, and then like there's this whole like, it's not like explicitly examined, but he like basically sexually assaults her. Like,
she was tortured.
Undresses her, takes images of her naked, and then he tortures Jim Gordon with those images in this movie. The Joker does some fucked up shit in this movie.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of brutal shit in other movies, but in terms of just straight up like torture that he inflicts on the characters, I think this is probably the most extreme example we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that the Joker in this movie is a lot more brutal, a lot more mentally unstable than we see really in any other portrayal of his character.
Also in most movies and things that we've seen, his character is not like he hasn't been around as long as he hasn't. Like, this movie depicts them as having fought, as Batman and the Joker having fought each other, like we said, for years and years and years. He's put him away multiple times. The Joker's escaped multiple times. Whereas in other movies, we haven't really seen the Joker for that length of time. So like we haven't seen him develop to his greatest form of madness. Whereas this movie kind of examines that. It examines the origin and kind of almost the end of the road for how far the Joker can go in terms of how brutal he can be towards the people that he's trying to harm.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that too is you kind of saw the reaction that people had to watching Joker, the live action. And as far as live action movies go, that was probably the most brutal and violent that we had seen the Joker character. Yeah. At least as far as what they were willing to actually depict on TV. So like Heath Ledger's Joker was, as far as like a descent into madness, a lot further along than a lot of the other that we have seen. Jack Nicholson's, you could tell he kind of had that, like he was just having fun with the crime and being the Joker.
And Jack Nicholson's also kind of more of an origin story, whereas with Heath Ledger there is no origin. He's just telling us about his past, but we don't get the actual like scenes of him becoming the Joker.
Exactly. But so between those three, and it's kind of messed up that we haven't actually mentioned Joaquin Phoenix. We just keep mentioning the movie.
I know.
Shout out Joaquin Phoenix.
Seriously.
The other two got shouts outs.
Shout out.
They got
shouts outs.
But those three, we've kind of seen the Joker depicted differently in those three characters. This one is kind of all of them in one. It's the Joker who is brutal and violent. It is one who has, for all intents and purposes, lost his mind completely.
Right.
He is no longer sane at all.
Yeah.
But he is also enjoying it. He's having fun. It's a game to him. He's in that sense, he is kind of the clown, right?
Yes, very much. Yeah.
And so this is kind of a combination of all three of those that I'm not sure people would be ready to see that in a live action movie. It would take a lot of work. Yeah. It would be very difficult on the actors, but also seeing how the audiences have reacted to past Jokers. Right. I don't know that this movie would be as successful in live action as it is in animation.
That's a great point. I think in terms of kind of final thoughts here, I'm curious to see what you think about this movie after we've watched a couple others, because I think while this is a very short movie, I think the pacing kind of suffers at points. I think jeez, you just pulled.
Dude, he's shedding so much. Look at my sock.
Yeah, I know. I've been looking at your sock this entire recording.
But I'm trying to pet him so that he stays calm. So he stays calm because he's hearing all these noises outside our door.
I think pacing wise, they had enough for like an hour and 5-minute movie, but they really wanted to make it closer to like a full length film length. Yeah. So they didn't
get there anyway, so they might as well.
I know. Yeah. Like it's an animated movie. It doesn't have to be an hour and 20 minutes. So I think the pacing kind of suffers a little bit at points. And while I think it's interesting, they kind of do this storyline with Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne Batman. I don't know that it's entirely necessary.
You're saying you didn't want to see Batman Batgirl sexy time?
Not particularly.
Well,
I mean, it wasn't like it just didn't. It didn't add anything to the story for me. No. Like it was just kind of a weird way to push the envelope, I guess, so to speak. And it didn't work for me. Maybe if they had spent a little more time on that idea, but then they just kind of played it off as like some like high school drama kind of, and it just kind of fell flat for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I also think that I don't really know that bringing Barbara Gordon into the story added a whole lot. Yeah. It made it a little more serious because everybody knows Jim Gordon, everybody knows like Batgirl. Mm-hmm. But having it be Barbara Gordon and then later in the end credit scenes revealing that she was another superhero.
Yeah, that she's doing some other stuff.
It didn't really add anything to the film. Right. It kind of added a little bit more confusion. And I think the idea that they were going for was they wanted it to feel important. They wanted the Joker hurting Barbara Gordon to feel like it really mattered in the story. Right. But really it could have been anybody to prove the point that the Joker is, violent and sadistic, and it didn't have to be Barbara Gordon. And so they tried too hard to establish that relationship between Barbara Gordon and Batman. Yeah. And, even showing Batgirl and showing the way that she's kind of going rogue from what Batman wants, and she's going after her own crimes as this kind of vigilante crime fighter. Right. In the end, it didn't really matter, and they spent a lot of time establishing her as a character. Right. And then basically didn't revisit it until the final scene when it was unimportant anyway.
Yeah. And that's kind of like it. Those moments felt like a prologue, and that's not really a compliment. It felt like a prologue because it just felt so separate from the main story. And I just feel like it makes sense to me to make it Barbara Gordon because of the relationship that Bruce Wayne has with Jim Gordon. Right. Like there are a lot of good ties there for where that it could make really good sense and be a good plot line that it's Barbara Gordon that it happens to. It's just the decisions they made to make her more of an impactful character. They just didn't work as well. Like there could have been surely there's a better way to set up her character within this storyline. You could even do it the way they did it, but it's just she kind of just like falls off by the wayside by the time the main storyline starts. Like there's no real good connection from the prologue to the main plot.
Yeah.
Like it just kind of separates itself almost, and it just doesn't feel as impactful as I think they were trying to be.
I agree. And I can see the point that they were trying to make, but it didn't flow or tie in the way that it probably should have.
Right. So
you want to grade it?
Yeah, grade wise, what you thinking?
I think I'm gonna go B- for this one.
Dang it! I was gonna go B- too.
That's fine.
I wanted to be different.
No, we can
though.
have the same. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Listen.
Continue. Sorry.
I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of exploring the animated versions of these stories is kind of cool, and I really enjoyed all of the little Easter eggs and tie-ins to previous movies. Of course, I loved the voice acting, kind of
so
giving
good.
us the classic voices of these characters. So I really loved that. But for kind of all the reasons we laid out as far as the story goes, it did leave some to be desired.
Yeah, I would go B- as well, pretty much for all those same reasons. I'm excited to introduce you to some movies that I think will fall into the A category for you.
Yeah,
and one of them it's probably, now I'm a big Watchmen fan. I think the Watchmen film is one of the greatest recreations of a graphic novel ever, and I think a very close second is The Dark Knight Returns.
Okay,
and we'll get to that. We'll get to some other ones too, because and I didn't really know this until I watched a lot of animated Batman movies, I think my sophomore year in college, and it kind of opened me up to this world of people who almost immediately recognize Batman as an animated character, as opposed, like, they love the Dark Knight films, but then they're like, some of the best Batman content ever has come in the animated universe, and I didn't know that until like 3 years ago.
Well, something that's really interesting is that I feel like Batman, more than any other comic book character, except for maybe Spider-Man, has been kind of, the story has been explored by a whole bunch of different mediums,
right? From
comic books,
I would agree.
to live action, to animated movies, and all of them kind of coming at it from a different angle. And there's very few characters that have been explored in that many ways, and it's something that's sort of unique to superheroes and to comic books in general, that you can't really do with a lot of other source material. Right. So it'll be interesting to see.
It will
see those other iterations
see what happens. Yeah. All right. Am I gonna?
You got it.
Let's say goodbye. All right, guys. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, leave us some comments in the comment section. We will reply. We reply to every single one.
All three of them so far.
If you're listening on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasting, wherever you get your audio, we are on there. So be sure to subscribe there. Leave us a 5-star review. Leave us a comment in your 5-star review. Let us know what you think.
Leave us a 1-star review.
Leave us a 1-star review. Whatever you think. If you hate it, great. If you love it, great. Let us know why you hate it. Let us know why you love it.
If you hate it, tell your friends.
If you hate it, tell your friends why you hate it so much.
Hey, listen, go listen to this terrible ass podcast.
It's so bad.
It's
awful.
Terrible. These guys are not funny. Their voices are annoying.
They're unfunny, but they think they're funny. They think their voices sound okay.
The movies they talk about are absolute garbage. Tell all your friends that.
Tell all your friends about it.
But make sure that they have to form their own opinion. Tell them that with the caveat of still go watch it.
Go check it out because of how bad it is. All right, guys. Up next, we've got Bly Manor Part 2. I'm real excited to bring that to you guys. We'll see you next time.
Out.
Leo, you were so good there.
Yeah.
After the first 18 minutes where you were not.